Hello, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. I'm excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And today's guest is Jeff Fallon. He's chairman and CEO at eVideon. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, John, it's great to be with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to be talking about kind of the room of the future and the evolution of hospital rooms today. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about yourself and eVideon.
Sure. So the company was founded about 29 years ago as experts in technology integrations. They were working with schools, primarily in the state of Michigan, when a brand new state-of-the-art hospital was built in Grand Rapids, where our headquarters is, by Metro Health. And they really wanted to have a state-of-the-art IPTV or Internet Protocol television system that actually engaged patients in their own care. So they asked this Grand Rapids company if they could do what they were doing for schools in a hospital environment. And the company said yes. And it was really off to the races at that point. And along the way, we've divested the school business that was a wonderful business, but we really wanted to stay focused entirely on healthcare. And they brought me in 3 years ago as the chairman and CEO with our first outside capital raise. And we've been focused entirely on the business of healthcare and specifically serving hospitals with in-room and across the campus engagement technologies, largely around the IPTV system backbone that was the heritage of the company. So today we remain headquartered in Grand Rapids, and we've got clients and employees all around the United States. I'll say that the company continues to be named eVideon, which you rightly pointed out at the beginning, but we've named our platform Vibe Health. And so you may hear me speak of Vibe Health, and you may see in our marketing materials this idea of Vibe Health. And so think of Microsoft as the overall company, and they have a platform called Office, and underneath Office there are various products. So we've taken the same approach to our platform, calling it Vibe Health, and there's solutions within. My own personal background is actually, this month marks 34 years in the business of healthcare.
Wow.
Largely on the medical device, diagnostic, pharmaceutical side of the world, and working with hospitals across the country. But about 12 years ago, I came to this business because I felt like this evolution of engaging patients in their own care and providing solutions for the staff that makes it easier for them to deliver higher quality, more satisfying care for more patients than ever was a calling that felt like the most important thing I could do with the rest of my career. So I'm thrilled to be in the position I am to deliver on that idea today.
Yeah. Well, you point out, interesting enough, that really the start of technology in the exam room was these TVs. And I think sometimes we forget how revolutionary a TV in a hospital room was when you have hours of waiting and you need some distraction. I mean, anyone that's flown and has watched TV probably understands that principle, right? But we've come a long ways, right? We've been talking about enabling technology in the exam room, the smart bed, the smart hospital room, all sorts of terminology for a long time. I mean, at least as long as I've been writing about healthcare technology. What do you feel is kind of unique about this time in the industry, and maybe something that we haven't seen previously that's really coming to fruition now?
Well, I think there's numerous things that were impediments to the idea of a smart room ever becoming ubiquitous before, and not least was this, I'd call it data plumbing under the counter, that is an EMR. And so when we didn't have an electronic medical record inside the hospital, it made it really difficult to do anything but science projects on top of the kitchen counter, so to speak. So now that data plumbing is done and the dust has largely settled around hospitals implementing electronic medical records, now hospitals, we find, are looking up from that data plumbing and saying, okay, now that we have those bits and bytes flowing and a record, we're looking for what value-added tools can make use of that flowing data underneath. So it was really the absence of a data backbone, I think, that was a strong impediment to the success of the smart room ideas. Also, the early iterations of smart room technologies, at least that I saw, were just frankly too expensive. I mean, $2,000 in hardware per room, not to mention a pretty hefty ongoing price tag to keep those things lit up and operational and optimized. It just was financially prohibited. I think, like many technologies, the cost of hardware and software continues to decline thanks to Murphy's Law, and we're all fortunate for the benefit of that. So technology is just, it's getting less expensive, more powerful and less expensive. And then I think the final thing is the pandemic really did a lot to accelerate things like telehealth, which of course are pretty obvious through the pandemic, but also for what we're doing inside the patient room. The need to engage patients from a pandemic safe distance, even if that pandemic safe distance was just on the other side of the door to the room, became crystal clear. Yeah. And so technologies that could actually enable staff to ensure that the patients understood what was going on for them so that they were less likely to be readmitted, to ensure that the staff didn't have to don PPE and, to enter the room, to ensure that the patient could still interact with friends and family and loved ones outside the hospital room. That pressure on the hospital room caused innovation to accelerate just like we've never seen it before. And I'm sure your listeners would agree that the innovation just accelerated to a ridiculous level at that point. And, that we've been the beneficiary of that. And I guess the last thing I'll say that's different now is this great resignation, which has hit nursing, hospital nursing particularly incredibly hard, has made it a strategic and maybe even existential imperative for a hospital to figure out how can they help their staff, their nursing staff particularly, do more in the same amount of time and operate at the highest level of the clinical authority. So we're doing things that make that more possible and actually, we hope, easier and certainly more satisfying to be a nurse caring for patients, whether there's a pandemic going on or not. So significantly different times now than 20 years ago when Smart Room became a thing people were talking about.
Yeah, so let's dive into some of those points. I mean, your first one is just fascinating. It's hard to trigger a patient education automatically when a medication's prescribed in a paper chart, right? I think that's what you're saying, right? Like it's
well said.
That there's not the triggers from a paper chart that you could have from an EHR that would, automate some of the tasks that are happening. So that's really fascinating. The COVID stuff, is that going to stay is my question, right? Like, do they want to get back in the room, or is the virtual rounding going to be the future for a lot of situations? And to your final point, right? Making them more efficient. Like I can round, much more efficiently to 10 rooms rather than walking to each of them. Like, is that going to stick, or are they going to be like, no, I kind of like, going in there, holding their hand, doing whatever's needed, right? Which is an important part of nursing as well.
Yeah. Well, there's already been a pretty significant drop off in the number of telehealth visits. I believe, and look, I'm no expert on this. I've got an opinion like everybody else. My sense is that folks like me who love the convenience of a telehealth visit are going to continue doing that, but there's some things you can't do a telehealth visit for. I mean, they seem to be pretty effective for dermatology diagnosis. I'm not sure that I want to see my cardiologist via a telehealth visit. My sense is that, the condition that's being diagnosed is pretty important. Though I do believe that the urgency for solutions, technology solutions that make it possible for a nurse to do things that are at the highest level of her clinical authority, meaning free the nurse up from responding to the need for a glass of water, or it's cold or noisy in the room, or the room needs to be cleaned. Like those are things, whether the nurse is actually taking care of that service recovery issue or merely pivoting that information to the appropriate department to take care of it, that takes time for the nurse. So solutions that can enable that kind of need to be triaged directly to the department and not interfering with the nurse doing the hand-holding that they so desperately want to and should be doing. So the idea is not throw technology at the nurse like an electronic medical record where they're sitting and typing things. Use technology to give the nurse time back and take things that are non high value added clinical interactions away from their day. So that's what really drives us. Is it's not just about turning on technology, it's about thinking about the clinical workflow and what changes for the nurse. What will they do differently, and what will others need to do differently? And then once you trigger something via the technology, what happens next? What happens 3 steps down that path to ensure that the process is standardized and the process is high quality and repeatable, and there's data behind it so that the hospital afterwards can look and see, how did we do? Did we keep up with our promise to reducing non-clinical tasks for our nurse? Did we deliver on our promise for keeping our patients attended to? Did we deliver on our promise to keep them comfortable, while we're also, of course, taking care of their very important, urgent, and frankly, most important reason for the patient to be in the bed, the clinical need. So that's really what drives us in what we're doing, is thinking together about what's possible with our hospital clients, and really that's the model that we think is our secret sauce. It's that intimacy of thinking together and then building together with our hospital clients.
So let's talk about the clinician experience, because you're right, like burnout's at an all-time high. Staff satisfaction really matters as they're leaving the industry, which is sad. I mean, when you go all the way for an RN degree and decide you don't even want to be a nurse anymore, that's tough, right? And there's staff challenges all over, right? So what does that look like from, an eVideon perspective? Is that the patients requesting water, right? I mean, great example, right? I need some water. Will you come, take out the trash? What, like all these mundane things that they would ask the nurse. And I'm giving bad examples, I'm sure. Is that what it looks like for, the patient would do that, and then, your housing staff would come and do it, or your food service staff would come do it instead of the nurse? Is that how it plays out? Or give me an idea of the workflow that you see.
Yeah, well, there's an ocean of possibilities. Any one of those examples you gave are real world and things that are possible today. Sadly, the bar is pretty low for this kind of innovation in hospitals, and it's not for lack of vision or willingness. There's just such inertia. Look, the primary interface device for a patient in a hospital bed, even today, in most hospital beds, probably 80% of the hospital beds in the United States today, the primary interface device is this,
Nurse call button.
1979, nurse call button. How is this possible? It's inertia, and it can be changed. It won't be changed overnight, but we're changing things together with hospitals that are thinking big together with us every day. So some examples of that, as you said. Imagine the patient, whether they're using a digital pillow speaker and an interface on the television on the foot wall that's connected to the electronic medical record, or they're using a tablet at the bedside. They're able to, rather than waiting for somebody to come around with a piece of paper and taking their breakfast, lunch, or dinner order face to face. Imagine the inefficiency of that. They're able to order their meals on this interface, and the menu that's presented to them has already been filtered for their clinical condition. If they're on a low sodium diet, they're not going to be presented with high sodium foods.
The dietitian loves that.
Exactly. So why not use technology to tune the menu, to just present to the patient what they should be having. And then we can also tune it to like a maximum number of calories or a minimum number of calories, or, a minimum number of, milligrams of anything in the food. And we can make it appealing too. It's not just a matter of presenting words and chicken salad on there. We can have pictures of what the chicken salad looks like. You've seen some hospitals are investing a great deal of time and effort into improving the food experience for their patients. One of our clients, Northwell, is doing tremendous things with Michelin star chefs at every one of their hospitals, or at least most of their hospitals. And it's astounding. You should look at what Northwell is doing. And so if you're that aspirational about it, why not make that meal ordering experience for that patient more modern, more seamless, more akin to what they're used to in their normal life. But that's really, incredibly low hanging fruit, digital meal ordering like that.
Yeah.
We're doing things, John, that are, um, look, if the patient is in pain, for example, one of the JCO standards of care is checking on the patient's pain level within an hour after giving them the pain medication. So that falls to the nurse, and the nurse is ideally going to come around to the room and ask the patient face to face what their pain score is at the moment. That's tremendous. It's a standard of care for nursing, but it can also be automated using technology so that when the patient's watching TV or distracting themselves with some sort of relaxing videos and music to just, perhaps ease their pain a bit, we can very gently prompt them an hour after the pain med was administered, as evidenced by the nurse scanning the patient's wristband and the med that they prescribed or they administered to them right there. You can just trigger this workflow to an hour later, ask the patient, a little prompt comes up on the television and says, "Hey, John, your comfort is very important to us. Can you give us an idea of what your pain score is right now?" Patient clicks a number on that pain scale, and it's logged if the hospital wants to the electronic medical record. But the patient's nurse can be alerted, whatever level the hospital deems to be alert worthy. So let's say the patient says, "My pain level is an 8." The nurse can get notified instantly via text message, email, or whatever communication tool the hospital uses that that patient is in pain. So, and then the routine can also inform the patient that the nurse is on the way to offer assistance. If it's a low score, it can simply be logged, and the nurse doesn't need to be alerted. But that's a great example of how technology can increase the intimacy between the nursing staff and the patient in a time of need, but also provide efficiency to that nurse who didn't have to walk in the room and find out that the pain score was a 2. They've now got more time to go and, as you said rightly, hold the hand of the patient who's got an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
Some good examples there.
Yeah, I love it. And it's interesting you talk about and we even led off with kind of the integration with the EHR matters, right? To take that next level of room of the future. Is the EHR the focal point of the integration, or do you do other integrations? It sounds like maybe some communication systems. Do you have to go to the ERP? Are there other food service systems? What's the integration look like today for these types of systems?
I don't mean to be facetious, but the answer is yes. Yeah. So the electronic medical record integration is primary. And that's going to inform the Vibe Health platform, who the patient is, what they're in the bed for, what's the diagnosis, what are the medications that they're on, what's their expected discharge date or guessed at discharge date, what language do they speak? And the entire interface is specifically designed for not just that hospital, but actually that patient then. So if it's a pediatric patient, it can be kind of a kid's interface. If they speak Spanish, it'll be in their language. That is core functionality driven by the electronic medical record integration. But there are an ocean of integrations possible. For example, hospitals are investing in these RTLS or real-time location systems that have beacons throughout the hospital. And those beacons and tags can be used to track stuff, whether it's medical devices or carts, but also can be used to track staff. And so we can integrate with those so that when the nurse walks into the room and the patient's watching television, the patient can see the name, the picture, the title of the staff that's just walked into the room. So the patient now feels like they know who is coming and going. And actually this can be logged so that the patient can look back and see who was that nurse that was in here an hour ago. Maybe the patient's asleep. The nurse comes and goes. They feel like the patient wakes up. The patient feels like nobody's been in to see me. Well, actually they can see who's been in to see me. Same thing for the family who comes to visit mom in the hospital. So integration to a real-time location system or a digital meal ordering system, such as you noted, There's an ocean of possibilities. One of the things that we think is a really important use for the Vibe Health platform is there are so many tools that hospitals are looking to bring into the hospital room these days. Um, Video translation has a
Mhm.
tremendous ROI for hospitals. I mean, they're required to
Yeah.
have translation available in a large number of languages on a moment's notice. And I can't imagine how daunting it is to meet the needs for translation according to those standards. But video translation using a tablet at the bedside is is easy and significantly less costly than having a team of all these multilingual people waiting around to speak to people who need that kind of translation. So, but this device to do that video translation needs to be brought into the room. It needs an interface in the room. Generally, these things would be a tablet brought into the room, sometimes on a cart. But there are other things like telesitter applications that need to be
Mhm.
brought into the room. And that's a camera and a display in the room. And the list goes on and on and on for the different things that need to be brought into the room. And um, where hospitals are really taking us, and we're thrilled to go do this with them, is to become the single interface for the patient and the staff in that room. So whether you're looking to bring in a telesitting application where they needed a display in the room, or a video translation application that needed a display and a camera in the room, we see it being a tremendous business for us to work with hospitals at integrating to those best of breed third-party applications that the hospital has chosen to work with, so that they don't have to have 10 different displays in the room and 5 different cameras. We're thrilled to work with those guys, and we think that actually increases our importance, our usefulness to the staff and to the hospital clients that we're thrilled to work with every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we need any more silos in healthcare. So I don't know a single clinician that wants one more device either. But it's
No.
interesting the impact on the patient experience as well. I mean, you've highlighted so many examples, whether it's the food ordering, which, the pressure of ordering when the nurse is there and the nurse is in a hurry. I mean, that's just a simple example of a better patient experience, right? Seeing who's come in is another example of the great patient experience. Obviously, the language one. I've been to a hospital in Italy where I spoke Italian, but even then, I was overwhelmed and I spoke the language mostly. And so, I can only imagine some great patient examples. Are there any other examples of innovative things that your customers are doing with technology? I mean, we've covered a lot already, but anything else you'd love to highlight?
Yeah, boy, we're excited about working with many new hospital system clients across the nation, and they've all got big visions for what's ahead in engaging patients and
Yeah.
providing tools for efficiency for their staffs.
So what's
Um,
ahead? Let's hear that too. What's the
yeah,
future of the hospital room?
yeah, I'll give you an example. So Tampa General Hospital is a massive hospital in Tampa, um, who's been really committed to this idea of bedside or in-room engagement technology for almost the last 10 years. And we were honored to have been chosen by them coming on 2 years ago to help them bring their vision to a new level. And they began by creating a room of the future, which we've mentioned a couple of times in this call. And I'm seeing more and more of these hospital systems that have big visions use a room of the future to be the place that they don't just mock up this technology, but they actually light it up in an integrated way, and they wire it all together to the electronic medical record, to the third party systems. They use it as a proving ground that their vision actually technically can work. And then they get the clinical teams buy into it, and then they deploy, and they're moving really rapidly to deploy those things. So, and we did some press releases together with Tampa General on this room of the future and what we're doing there with them. So we've had our in-room smart TV kind of core platform, we call it Engage, in their 1,100 beds for coming on 2 years now. And they're moving very rapidly to deploy these digital whiteboards
Hmm.
We call it an Insight digital whiteboard, and a digital door sign. We call it a Wear digital door sign. So
Okay.
smart displays, replacing that dry erase board on the wall of the patient room with a smart display that's also integrated to the IT systems that the hospital's invested in. Likewise, a tablet outside the entrance to the room that provides HIPAA compliant graphics and informatics and
Hmm.
words that just like an air traffic controller begins to be able to look at a very dense field of highly important mission critical information and at a glance know what all this mess is because they're just familiar with the informatics. So it's the same idea with these digital door signs. As the staff walks up, they know that, red means the patient is in isolation, or doves mean the patient is
Sleeping.
well, passing, in the process of
Oh,
passing,
okay.
for example. So Tampa General is a great example of a hospital system that has deployed the room of the future idea, demonstrated technologies, fully integrated, and then moving rapidly to deploy them inside their own environment. So that's a pretty cool project that we're on. There was that room of the future, and then bringing these digital whiteboards inside the room, highly dense in terms of integrated clinical information, both for the patient and for the staff, on that formerly handwritten, which isn't a fantastic idea in a pandemic, dry erase board, real-time information for the staff. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that they're thinking really big about that I hadn't seen anyplace else. So they've got a vision where if a patient in a room codes, the digital whiteboard actually is going to switch immediately from the less intense version of a digital whiteboard
Sure.
that you would imagine in a room, patient's pain score, their name, the nurse's name, when's the next pain med, things like that, to the Epic interface for a coding patient, so that
Hmm.
we're just immediately switching this thing so that when the staff is in the room, they know who's in the room. They have the informatics at their fingertips that directly from the Epic system. Frankly, it is a display of the Epic system in that room, so that they're able to immediately deliver the best care they can for a patient who's coding. So that's a good example of how we're not looking to build everything. We're looking to work with other companies who've done tremendous things, and tremendous in the eyes of the hospital clients that have chosen to partner with us, so that the staff has the information they need, whatever the level of acuity is for that at the moment they need it, and in the right place too. So whether it's right outside the room or inside the room or wherever, that's a pretty exciting project that we're on. And frankly, feels like it's a completely different category, a completely different business than what the heritage of this whole thing has been.
No, it does it. And I think we underestimate how much that whiteboard drove. I mean, I've had 4 kids, so I know enough. And one of them, we spent a week in the hospital after he was born. All was well, but like how many times I looked at that board to know the next feeding, to know the next pain meds, to know the next whatever. Right? It was interesting, and to know the nurse's name. That is it was kind of reminds me when we implemented an EMR. We realized how much that paper chart actually influence the workflow. I think the same is true for that board in the hospital room. So that's a really interesting effort you got going on there.
Yeah, and frankly, it's a significantly more intense device to build and deploy. There's just that, as I said, the density of the information and the number of integrations to light that up and do it in a really thoughtful way. It requires a good lift on our part, and working together with our hospital clients. But it's just so right. I mean, pandemic aside, writing things on a dry erase marker, how real time can that be? It's as soon as it's written, it's no longer real time. If you're integrating it to the electronic medical record, it can literally be instantaneously real time, so that when something changes, it happens in an automated way. And our sense is that if you're somebody, whether it's a doctor or a nurse, uh, working in a hospital, and you come to appreciate the efficiency and the accuracy, your ability to deliver highly reliable care in a more satisfying way at the highest level of your clinical authority. If you've come to, um, as we've all kind of come to learn to lean on these digital devices to make sure we're doing the right thing at the right time and have the right information at our fingertips, there's no difference being a nurse or a doctor in a hospital. If you took that smartphone away from me, I would not be as effective. I would
Yeah.
not be as accurate. I'd be in the wrong time at the wrong place at the wrong time. So it's the same thing. Our sense is nurses and doctors will come to prefer and even insist on working at hospitals that have this technology. It's not just a differentiator in the competitive world of trying to attract patients to your hospital. It's also a differentiator in trying to attract the best and the brightest nurses and doctors. And, once they've had the benefit of this stuff, it really will become, it'll become, if you walked into a hotel room and they had a cathode ray tube TV sitting on the credenza there on the dresser, you'd wonder what other corners they might have cut. And that equation or that value judgment is going to be made even subconsciously by nurses and doctors as well as patients who come to expect this stuff. So we're excited about being on the journey with those hospitals that are trying to deliver on this. And it's not just about technology for technology's sake. I mean, if you believe that, then throw away your iPhone and talk to me in a week.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, though, as you describe it, is that there is a journey here, right? And probably because there's so many rooms and so much investment in the past and all that, is it fair to say, and I wonder if this is going to lead to haves and haves nots, if you will, right? That, if you haven't been down this smart hospital room journey, like, in order to catch up, you got to get in the game first. You can't go straight to these digital whiteboards. I wouldn't think, right? You need the smart bed first that then leads to those, or I don't know. Is that fair? Or, how is it for a hospital that maybe hasn't had this strategy that's longer term and making the room smart, right? Or the bed smart, is there a lot of catch up that needed, or can they start, basically accelerate the timeline? What are you seeing there for those that may not be as advanced as the Tampa General?
Yeah. I think one of our clients is a critical access hospital in Minnesota. It's called River's Edge. You guys should look them up. I'm blown away by what River's Edge Hospital has done in the shadow of Mayo. 5 stars across the board on every measure of patient satisfaction, high quality scores in total joint replacement, competing with Mayo. Mayo's no slouch in terms of patient satisfaction and quality in total joints as well. This is a critical access hospital. I'll underline that again in case you didn't hear it when I said it. 25 beds, critical access hospital. Nothing against the critical access hospitals that are doing such a heroic thing to serve people in underserved areas. I'm simply blown away by what River's Edge has done, even before they became our client. We're not taking any credit for what River's Edge is doing. We're frankly in awe. But I would say that, to answer your question, John, if a critical access hospital in rural Minnesota is able to achieve those kinds of patient satisfaction and quality scores, given all the pressures on critical access hospitals, then I don't mean to dismiss the challenge that every other hospital has in getting to those levels of performance. And I'm sure there's some that would have some sense that, well, there's, a unique situation for River's Edge Hospital, but I'm just blown away by any CAH that's able to achieve that kind of stuff. So they had a big dream, a big aspiration, and they've achieved it. They are actually, a great example of top performers continue to invest, and I don't mean just buy solutions. They invest strategic thinking time in getting better. They're not content to just sit on their laurels. That said, I guess I'm trying to answer your question about is there a haves and have nots?
Mhm.
They're a good example of a hospital that could have said, well, we're kind of behind the eight ball. We can't do that. And they didn't accept that as a potential outcome. And they've been doing this for quite some time. I expect they're going to continue to be a high performer. The other thing that you asked, John, was about, is it too late, or like, do you need to have a smart bed or something before you put a digital whiteboard up, or an engaging television platform integrated to your electronic medical record? I'd say no.
Mhm.
I'm not in the smart beds business, never have been, and I appreciate all the innovation that those guys have done, and I think there's amazing things that should be done and are kind of must-haves. My sense is that, I heard a podcast recently that said there's like 25 clinical devices in every patient room. And so I would say that there's millions of dollars in technology surrounding patients, things like IV pumps, oxygen, providing equipment, EKGs, blood pressure monitors, all of that stuff. They surround the patient with millions and millions of dollars in technology that keeps them healthy and alive. We all pray. And that should absolutely be the case. But to ignore the idea that there is a human being sitting in that bed who should also be in the loop as to what's happening and should be informed as to who's coming and going and what are these drugs and devices and what's my plan for care and when do I get out of here and how do I tell somebody without bothering my nurse by hitting a button, and I really don't want to bother this person who I really want to be nice to me and really want to take care of me. I don't want to bother them. How do I do this? So just this idea of surrounding people, even in the most, I don't know, what's the word, underfunded hospitals, maybe even more so in those underfunded hospitals, it sort of demands for that patient to be treated with that sort of respect and engagement as a participant and a decision maker in their care, and not somebody who's just receiving care. So I think, and obviously it's our business, so I'm kind of biased, I admit that, but as a human being whose sister's a nurse and my wife's a nurse, and I just think that the time has absolutely come for hospitals to care for people as if they're people in their rooms, and not just a need to be replaced or a mom having a baby like that. And this kind of technology is what makes it possible for the staff to do it in the face of all of the work they've got to go do. It's just, it should enable more high touch for that staff, not less.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a beautiful vision. I love it. And I think people will embrace that, both of those ideas, right? And I think they're embracing it more and more, the latter one, which they didn't for lots of different reasons, embracing the patient experience the way that we can today. I think that's part of it as well. So thanks so much, Jeff, for sharing all these insights into the clinician experience, the patient experience, and some amazing technology in this room of the future. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, John.